We gather this morning on what is known as the 8th Sunday of Ordinary Time, and I'm sure all of you knew that. In 3 days, we are invited to explore all things wilderness in our individual lives as well as the life of our faith community as we gather for Ash Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. 40 days set aside as a time to perhaps slow down a bit and to ask the questions that perhaps need to be asked in our lives, and to simply be present to all that wilderness may have in store for us. Not so much a time during Lent to be deprived or to forego, if you will, the chocolate or the Chardonnay or the Merlot, but to kind of take it up a notch. It's not about so much what we deprive ourselves from, but what it is that we are willing to take on and not so much give up. It is as much a time to perhaps be a bit more still and reflective in our life. Difficult as this may sound, perhaps it's a time that we give ourselves a little bit of space and not be perhaps quite as hair-trigger around all things political. That's a big challenge. A time to actually give time and space to what that inner voice that has been asking time with each of us for far too long. To simply listen to that inner voice that's been trying to get your attention. Dorothy Day, a social activist along with Peter Marin, started the Catholic worker movement. We are provided a starting point in these words from Dorothy Day. The greatest challenge of the day is how to bring about a revolution of the heart, a revolution which has to start with each and every one of us first. As we heard in the gospel, remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Our gospel today highlights the moral imperative, allowing ourselves the opportunity to have that revolution, if you will, that revelation of the heart. Luke's gospel warns that the one who is unable to see the goodness of others and instead chooses to speak most unkindly of them instead reveals their own true measure of openness to God's goodness. In our current wilderness as a nation, we find ourselves engulfed in a never-ending need to see our life through a lens of us and them. It's a daily occurrence. It's baked into our vocabulary now. Us and them, us and them. It is through there, again, it is almost as though there are daily prizes for those who see only the faults of others and rush to point out those faults. The blame game can only result in our blocking our own hearts from receiving and giving God's unfathomable love to one another. We heard in the gospel today, for from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. In fact, what we say is related to what we're feeling in our hearts. It speaks the truth, and we need to be aware of that. At the end of the day, it really is about the choices that we make between a heart of love and gratitude or a heart filled with fear and a heart filled with indifference. Most people are familiar with the Robert Frost poem entitled "The Road Not Taken." Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. The poet tells us of coming across two paths while walking and having to decide exactly which path to take. Remembering that this is a poem and the image of the roads are clearly meant to serve as metaphor, we are reminded of the many and often difficult choices that we need to make in life. Both roads look exactly the same from this poet's perspective. Both appear equally worn, and it is impossible to determine where either road may actually take you. In any wilderness, there are rarely guides or signposts. No clear indication that one road is preferable to the other road. But the poet does remind us of the importance of making a choice for one of the roads, which means obviously not choosing the other road. The poem ends, in my opinion, quite famously with these words: "Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled, and it has made all the difference." The road less traveled has made all the difference. When I reflect on this poem, I hear a meditation on the difficult and often frightening choices that life presents, and the challenge of knowing which road to take. But I also hear the recognition, if not the insistence, that nevertheless we do need to make choices. Avoiding a decision is a decision in itself. And we have many choices around us, many issues that confront us that we need to look at on a daily basis, deciding where we want to land on any one subject. There's a great deal on the line. There's a great deal in the balance for both our church as well as our nation. I do believe that our very nation's future is in the balance. Decisions being made, good or bad, our lovely democracy is in peril. Choices that we make around racism, systemic racism, how we look or feel in any situation when we experience the bite of racism. Gender inequality, homophobia, women's right to access all of the sacraments. The list goes on and on. We cannot be deaf to any of it. We're constantly making choices. The ever-growing list of deep concerns that are all intimately connected to this fact. The decisions that we make are all tied to and need to be tied to justice for all people. That's the major ingredient. The choices made need to provide justice for all people. We cannot afford to be half-hearted as we choose the roads we travel in our nation as well as our church. Most people who live on the margins in life have far fewer choices than we have who live in abundance. We are not called in this wilderness to be always on alert to find the off-ramp to indifference. We put a lot of attention into how can we just avoid? How can I get on that off-ramp? Now, more than ever, is the time to be all in for justice. All in for justice. As St. Paul reminds us in our second reading, be firm, steadfast, always devoted to the work of justice in the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your efforts are never, ever, ever in vain. As we accept this invitation to explore what wilderness can mean for us in Lent, consider choosing the road that could very well lead to living a more principled life. In some ways, that's a bit of an old-fashioned term, to live a principled life. But I believe there's merit in it. A life of principle has a certain challenge. We can't be indifferent. Following a set of moral rules is to be principled, such as not stealing, not cheating, and treating people with respect and fairness. A principled life has everything to do with living a life of kindness, bottom line. It demonstrates a consistency between one's beliefs and one's actions. In closing, and as we engage the wilderness of this upcoming Lenten season, I make a choice today to admonish our world leaders. I make a choice today to admonish our national politicians to cease choosing dead-end roads when it comes to leadership and expecting everyone else to follow a dead-end sign to nowhere. That is not leadership. The very idea that some lives matter less than others, as was painfully showcased to the entire world community this last week, most recently in our Oval Office, in our White House, is at the root of injustice that confronts us on a daily basis. If you want to know where we're at and where we should not be, is to look in the picture window of our nation, as we all saw this last week. It should make it crystal clear that we need to make a very different choice. I spoke to a young man who came to try to fix my doggone TV last night, who's from Ukraine. The TV became not the issue. Had an amazing conversation. And I felt the need to apologize. I close, as I did 3 weeks ago, with the admonition of Episcopal Bishop Mary Ann Edgar Buddy, who, as you will recall, provided these words to several sitting in the front pew, all of which apparently did not hear her that day. I share these words once again. have mercy upon all those who are frightened. We were all strangers at one time in this land. May we honor the dignity of all people. May we speak our truth to one another in love. May we walk humbly with our God and with one another for the good of all people, in our world, in our nation, and in our church. As the poet reminded us, I took the road less traveled, and it has made all of the difference. St. Joan of Arc, please hear this. The courage it takes to leave behind what's not for you, that's not for you anymore, is the exact same courage that will help you find your way to what is. Courage is courage. Let go of that which is no longer you. Open the door, make new decisions. Perhaps it's a road less traveled. Be kind, work for justice, and welcome to the wilderness that we're already in. Amen.